Hi everyone, thank you for coming back. Hope everyone had a good lunch. It's really good weather outside. I really like this space. I feel like you're outdoors, but you're not, but you are. But my name is Carlo. I work with Troy in the Future Play Lab. I work as a creative producer. I also teach in RMIT in the Masters of Animation Games and Interactivity, which I also graduated on. So it's been a roller coaster of the last 2 years for me. Thanks, Troy. Just to give you a quick kind of introduction about what the Future Play Lab is, I'll pass it on to Troy in a bit. But the things I do in the Future Play Lab is very, I guess, the epitome of multitasking and multidisciplinary. I normally engage with artists and set up our events, do the documentation for all of the things, the parklet that you've seen earlier as well. And just an all-around person. And also, I'll also be talking about the Clarendon Street Arcade much later on. And yeah, just to give you an idea of what the Future Play Lab is it actually futuristic? We actually do things outside of the present here. I'll pass it on to Troy in a second.
Thanks, Carlo. Yeah, I'll keep this intro brief because I think you'll probably get a sense of what the Future Play Lab does through the various projects that we've presented today and also people that we're collaborating with. But essentially, especially also because I didn't remember to introduce myself at the start of today, I'm a VC Senior Research Fellow at RMIT University, and that's a position I started in 2019. With the idea to work with urban play. And of course that was pre-pandemic, and at that time I was doing a lot of projects working with public space and games and interrogating what it means to be in the city and what playable cities are all about. I just completed a knowledge fellowship with City of Melbourne, spending time in UK, Europe, Barcelona, Copenhagen, and then I ended up going to places like Tampere and Aarhus to collaborate with people studying play there, including Matthias and also Dale Leoki, who was at Tampere University. Anyway, long story short, that inspired me to use this research fellowship not only for myself, which was, it's great, 4 years to research whatever you want, but also to bring people together to collaborate on these types of projects. But then during the pandemic, the Urban Play Lab became the Future Play Lab because a number of things were happening. It seemed to be even more important to focus on the near future, what was happening and maybe how cities were changing and how that was really an opportunity to not only play for the sake of play, which is wonderful, but also to look at how play can, and this is really the theme of today, shape and change our connection to place, the fabric of place itself, our understanding of place. And so it took a turn into speculative design, and so the lab itself is both a theoretical space. So there are people like Dale Leoki who are working as ethnographers who are publishing and studying urban play. Publishing studies on urban play. But then there are people that we'll hear from today who are also not only Nguyen is doing two PhD candidates in the lab here who are also undertaking that study, but also making things. So it's really fundamentally also a makerspace. It's always a mess, but that's always a good thing because things are being made. So yeah, that's really what the Future Play Lab is. It's a place for us to play and to bring our experiments into the world.
Thanks, Troy. And I think for me it's really about reimagining play and urban play as well. I tell you what, it's really hard to explain to my parents what I do. I feel like, all those time I spend playing video games, it's not a waste of time at all, Mom. But then I can say that I can do it as my job, as for research, and kind of engage people in play as well. I'm not really used to talking in front of stages like this. I'm more used to talking in front of the classroom. So Hope you don't mind if sometimes I stutter. Right, so I'll play a video about the street arcade, so everyone gets an idea of what it's about.
What we wanted to do in the lab was to really experiment with what a post-pandemic urban play street arcade could be. To do that, we experimented both with the shape of the arcade machines themselves. So all the classic arcade elements are there: sound, light, multiplayer gameplay, but they've been reimagined through the lens of contemporary urban landscape.
I think one of the interesting things about the whole development process of the Clarendon Street Arcade is that it really had this multidisciplinary atmosphere every time we were in the lab and creating a project. So you would have game designers and back-end developers in one table, and then you'd have industrial designers painting and sawing, drilling things, and interactive designers wiring LED and Arduinos, and then you'd have fabrication and all of these different aspects of game design.
These games are playful and entertaining, but some of them also are challenging the conventions or expectations around what games are. And so games don't necessarily always have to be 100% about entertainment. They can also have a message or be, in this case, a public artwork.
Just kind of uncovers how many elements that is involved in making public street arcades. It's not just video game development, it's all these different disciplines.
When we're working in public space, we're always reframing or reimagining things. So in this case, reimagining what arcade cabinets can be. So they're on the street, they're free, and they have games made in Melbourne, for Melbourne, built into them.
Yeah, so that's the Clarendon Street Arcade. There's so much more we can show in the video, but we wanted to keep it short this time. I'll give you a quick kind of background of how this project developed and what it is in the first place. It feels so unheard of to think of arcades down in the street. It's very crazy. But really, the Clarendon Street Arcade kind of takes you into this arcade gaming trail. Those things don't really connect all the time, but it is. So they're playable arcades in the footpath, free to play for everyone. And it involves kind of all of these iconic stores and shop fronts in Clarendon Street. And the games that are created for the Clarendon Street Arcade are simply mostly classic games that have been reimagined or recontextualized in the Melbourne setting. So it's really games made in Melbourne, for Melbourne with a twist. So we don't necessarily kind of just have Pac-Man there and call it a day. You'd have things like a tram chaser, which Eamonn will explain later. Things that you could relate to, and you find yourself, this is probably something I experienced. I've never imagined to play a video game like this in the street. So that's pretty much what the Clarendon Street Arcade is. That's me kind of fixing the hardware inside the arcade. And just to be formal with things, the Clarendon Street Arcade was supported by the City of Port Phillip Council, and it's funded under the Victorian Government's COVID-Safe Outdoor Activation Fund. And it's also in partnership with the RMIT Future Play Lab. It feels like a lot of work when we did this, but I think we only took less than 2 months, a very manic time to just make all of these arcades. But it just really started with me, Troy, and eventually we got Nick Manjaredson as our technical director. It was just sketches on paper until slowly the team just became larger and larger. And I just really want to emphasize how much varied the disciplines that come into the project. You have designers, industrial designers, you have an architect, and you have music designers, sound designers, and yeah, there's just so many people that are involved in this. So the Carlo Street Arcade was created with local game makers, artists, designers, academics, and First Nation peoples, and even game design and animation students. And so this is the first arcade. It looks pretty standard, right? So this is called a 10-in-1. So we have 5 arcade cabinets down in Clarendon Street. You're not missing out. They're still up, I hope. They're still up there in Clarendon Street. So this is the 10-in-1 arcade. So it pretty much looks like your standard arcade cabinet. The reason why we called it a 10-in-1, I just look young, but I'm actually quite old. I grew up with a super family computer, and I remember these cartridges with multiple games in one that you jam pack into this one cartridge, and that's what we wanted to bring here. We didn't get to do 10 games though, but it opens up this opportunity for other game makers and students and collaborators to contribute to this growing 10-in-1 arcade. At the moment, we have 3-4 games now. It's going to be 5 compacts this weekend. And so yeah, you play 1 or 2 player games with a joystick and 2 buttons, and it's just really cool to see people just wondering what this curious thing is doing in the street. And we have all sorts of people playing it, children, even their parents. I think the parents hate it because if they have to go somewhere, they can't. If they're in a rush, you're not in a rush anymore because the kids will probably just stay and linger. But we've had interesting responses as well when we brought all of these arcades in the street. It's like, it's a waste of money. Are you crazy? It's going to be stolen. But I've gone to this space once or twice a week just to make sure that they're not stolen or anything. Sometimes they get damaged. Sometimes the public has an opinion on how to collaborate the exterior look of the arcades. But I guess it feels utopian, but in a sense, it's a risk that we understood. It's all public space. It's subject to weatherproofing, vandalism, and all of these things. But surprisingly, it seems pretty good so far. Right. The 10-in-1 is located in front of Batoni's Pizza. I think it's been there since the 60s. It's a very iconic pizza place in Clarendon Street, and very friendly staff as well. The next arcade is Yawa. So Troy will be explaining later on what Yawa is, but just briefly, Yawa is a game where 4 players must work together in an on-screen adventure across an abstract map of the country, discovering stories as they go. One of the unique things about Yawa is that, unlike other games, there's no win or lose state. There's no game over, no one wins. It's simply a shared journey or a shared collaborative experience by possibly 4 strangers sitting there, and you just simply explore. So it's controlled with 4 joysticks. It looks like a table. In fact, some people use that as a table to drink coffee. They don't even realize that there's a game there. But it's just this, it's in this corner of Clarendon Street that when it's 5 p.m., the sun is just setting perfectly on that spot. So if you want to play Yawa in the most picturesque time, do it at sunset. I'll have Troy explain later what Yawa is, but it's by Narwi Carlin Briggs, Jara Carolina Steele, Narayana Johnson, and it's coded by Duncan Corrigan. So that's a screenshot of Yawa. So you get to discover all of these words, and LED lights come up when you discover these words. And this was a photo shoot that we did, but what happened is that it was also a good conversation space that you're just playing kind of mindlessly, but you're just having conversation, and it's suddenly a different experience altogether. Right. Next, this is, Yawa is located in front of Belocho Eyewear, 242 Clarendon Street. All of them are just located in one single footpath, so you'll see them right away. The next arcade is Musimoji. So Musimoji is by Troy Innocent, Nick Marjarison, and Alison Walker. So this kind of monolithic looking structure is an arcade cabinet that you can play with up to 3 players. So each player has 3 buttons. There's no joystick in this one. And they simply compete to create music, and they kind of fire off emojis, or you can destroy the emojis, and until a certain emotion wins in the end, and it says something like, "This place feels anger," or something. It's also one of those arcade cabinets that we got a screen smash. Maybe they internalized that anger, but it just costs us a TV. But it's really interesting kind of. Emotions are just really ambiguous and analogous that way. You can share them, you can destroy other people's emotions in a kind of playful way. So, and it has this really unique structure to it that the screen isn't square, it's kind of diamond, and you have all of these lights and sound firing off as well. The next one, it's called Jukebot. It's in front of, I keep forgetting where the arcades are. This one is in front of Mitchell and Kay, clothing store owned by Andrew. And I like how Andrew's very protective with the arcade cabinet in front of his space. He tells me all about the experiences he encounters in the arcade. So it's really just good to see the shop owners and the store owners be kind of protective with all of the things that they put in front of their store. And it just gradually became that way. At first it was shock and distrust, but now it's just really protective. This next one is called Jukebot. Jukebot is a interactive jukebox for up to 3 players, or maybe more if you have other players who want to join in. Jukebot doesn't have a screen. It simply has 24 buttons. So you have an equal number of red, green, and blue buttons. And depending on the color that you choose, you kind of compete against your fellow players of who presses that color first. Alright, they could choose red or they could choose green, and each color would have a different genre as well. And when someone wins, it plays this music track composed by original composers as well. It's just party time afterwards, and then the game resets. And it's located in front of Desertopia, so sometimes the buttons might be sticky with all the gelato on the buttons, but at least there's someone's playing that. But yeah, and Steve and Glenn who owns Desertopia are also really protective about Jukebot, and it's probably the first thing you're going to see once you head to Clarendon Street. You can head down the tram, that's the first thing you'll see in Eamonn as well. And it's simply an interactive robot and a jukebox. Next one is Umesi Ho. Umesi Ho is the latest project from the Umesi Play Collective. It's by Umesi. Uyen will be able to speak about Umesi later on. But just briefly, it resembles a mound of grass on the pavement. It's just a massive mound of grass. I feel like there should be a hobbit living there or something. But how Umesi Ho is structured is that you have 6 buttons around this hole on the ground. And if anyone has played Dance Dance Revolution, it's probably close to that experience. But you kind of travel through this underground world of Umesi creatures that you uncover. And then you're treated with this very awesome sound design by Finnish. Yeah, it's a really interesting experience to use your feet instead of your hands to play on that. Normally, when I pass by here sometimes, if people aren't playing, they're using it as a sunbathing station, which also works well, I guess, in the footpath. And yeah, these are just, this is probably the first night we had an arcade there, and it's also like a parent trying to release their child to college. We had to leave it for the first night. We had it in the lab for so many nights, and we were scared if it would disappear the next day. It's really surprising, and it's really hard to imagine that they've all been out there for almost 3 months now, and they're going to still be out there for most of October. So if you have time, and if you're feeling risky and playful, you can play in this Clarendon Street arcade. Before I welcome Eamonn to explain the Manji 10-in-1, feel free to follow us as well, and they will help. And if you want to follow the development process of the Clarendon Street arcades, Dale York here has been our embedded ethnographer who has been writing the updates and all. You'll see all of the sketches and all of the mess in the lab. So the lab isn't something with a singular look. It just changes all the time because of all these various disciplines that's there. And yeah, for me, the street arcade is really a balancing act of engaging the community, making the arcades heat-proof and rain-proof and weather-proof, So it's all of these learning experiences. We're not arcade makers. This is probably the first arcade I made. So there's a lot of learning, things that we might want to bring if we eventually have future versions of the arcade that we learn from this experience. And constantly, we'll also be updating these arcades with more features and, as I mentioned, games in 10 in 1. But you'll probably find out about that when you follow us on Playful now. So, yeah, I guess in closing for me, Harte Street Arcade is really to imagine how arcade cabinets could be, or how play could be in an urban setting, or even how video games can be. It's not simply on your phone or your mobile screen or your computer. It could be an arcade out on the street. And I guess it's really just cool that way. So, yeah, and how it brings urban play to the surrounding community. So I'd like to welcome Eamonn next to talk about the Magi 10 in 1. I would call it the Magi 10 in 1 because, actually no, it's going to be Troy first. So apologies for that, Eamonn. Right. So I'd like to welcome Troy to talk about Yawa, one of the arcades in the Harte Street Arcade.
Thanks for that, Carlo. It's really fantastic overview of the project and the process of it coming out of the lab and our experiments with urban play. And if you're interested in doing an even deeper dive on this project, I would also mention that in a week we'll be releasing I think a 90-page report on the process of building the arcade, which is really talking about the lab process. So we explore this project not only to deliver a public outcome for the City of Port Phillip, but also to experiment with the form of arcade cabinets in an urban play context. But also, if that wasn't enough, we wanted to experiment with the lab process itself, because it was quite a unique opportunity, having, again, been outside of the lab for 2 years, to suddenly have, at sometimes, 20 people all together in the space making things together. So we were experimenting also with methodology, and the report is largely about that methodology of, making these types of experimental play projects in public space. The project I'm going to talk about is Yawa, which is a project that came out of my collaboration with Ngawi, Carolyn Briggs, but also another Indigenous Boonwurrung artist, Ajara Carolina Steele, who you're probably familiar with her work. She's made a lot of public artworks around Melbourne, has quite a distinctive futuristic style that works with Kulin patterns. So we'll kind of be talking about how they came into this game world and how they kind of generated the game world that Duncan coded. But first, what was the key idea behind Yawa? The key idea was, as Carlo outlined, a kind of open-ended space that people could explore just using one joystick. So you can see the image of a couple of people playing with these pink joysticks, looking into a tabletop arcade game. And so probably many people are familiar with that tabletop format, which I really enjoy because, it's a completely different engagement with, looking down. I think there's something about looking into screens that are not on a wall, but and probably Nguyen can talk about this with the Yamasee Hall as well, but that different relationship to the screen, whether you're standing over it or sitting in front of it. So, but also to look at how a game could embed and Indigenous language. And so there are, in this first version, 10 Boonwurrung words. The update that just went in now, there's 20 Boonwurrung words that are recorded. So they're recordings of Ngawi Carolyn Briggs saying the word and then her translation. So they appear on screen. So it's also now been seen by schools as a potential kind of learning or engagement activity. That's not why we made it. It was more of a kind of an experience. If you learn language through it, that's incidental. But the connection to place is really those words were and still are describing what was there, as Naomi was saying. That area of South Melbourne, Albert Park and so forth, was a wetlands coming pretty much right up to where the Burrarung is now. So if you can imagine that you get down to the end of where Flinders Street Station is and you'd hit a wetlands, and that would just continue until you got to the bay, and it was full of plants and birds and all kinds of just life. So it's a really vital, vibrant space. And so the selection of words in this Yawa space, and sorry, I should say Yawa is loosely translated to journey. So this was the concept around the idea of undertaking a journey through a game world that was, I guess, presented as a fiction because it's digital, but at the same time it's completely connected to the space that's around it. So yeah, as I said, through collaboration with Naui Carolyn Briggs, it was pitched this concept to her, and unfortunately she was really into it. So we started really with a recording session. So there's one of her books which is about language, has a whole number of stories in it, Boomerang stories like Time of Chaos that she mentioned this morning. But also at the end there's a list of about 100 words. So this is one of the things that is really important to her is language revitalisation, so bringing it back. So we went through that and looked at 20 possible words, and then kind of recorded those over a 1-2 hour session to get the right feel. And then the concept was presented to Jara, who you can see here with her tram. I think, so she, you might know her also from Rising. She curated the latest edition of the Melbourne Art Tram project, and you can see that this project is very much in her style of, as I said, this kind of futurist aesthetic. And presented to her this idea of, we started talking about Gauntlet, actually, if anyone's familiar with that game, which is, fighting dungeon crawler type game. But essentially, in this case, it was, 4 players who are not crawling a dungeon, but exploring this, abstract landscape. So talking through how to translate her work with Kulin patterns and language. The first thing that came to mind was the tiled nature of a lot of 2D arcade games, and so proposed to her to make these 8 tiles that could be interlocked in any different way, so that when you see the artwork itself, I'll come back to the cabinet. It's this kind of pattern, which is like an abstract world, but at the same time is embedded with her visual language. And over the top of that, so the players play as these possum spirits, what she calls Wurup, which is one part of her artistic iconography, but also this translation of I guess one of the life forms that, I guess possums still live in South Melbourne. Possums live everywhere. They're super hardy and urban dwellers. But these possum spirits, and so you take on one of those and you move through the landscape. And at first, as Carlo pointed out, it's just this collective journey, because if you move together, the landscape scrolls and moves about with you. If you move apart, then it kind of gets bigger. And then eventually you run into one of the words and you hear Naui Carolyn say, Yawa, journey, and then you keep exploring and finding these words, and there is no end point until people drop in and drop out of the game, and you can play it 1 player, 2, 3, 4. It's really very, very open-ended gameplay. Am I going for time? Great, okay. Okay, perfect. So this was the original concept. And originally I pitched this. There's someone here today who might appreciate this. In this hidden park in South Melbourne, there's this tiny, tiny little park that nobody knows about. But it's really wonderful. And so we originally pitched it for that little hidden park, but it ended up on Clarendon Street. And in fact, if anything, this is the one thing I would change about this project is where it is. It's, sometimes it's not visible because the sun is hitting it from a certain angle and so forth, so it really needs a different type of space. But the concept was to have 4 people sitting around this table in a really casual, relaxed space. And this is my personal experience of it as well when we were testing it and installing it. I had conversations with strangers because I was just sitting there and they'd come and play, and even ended up helping one person activate their mobile phone SIM card because they, that was just what they needed to do that day. So it was really super social space, and really enjoyed working with it. So this is actually an image from the Children's Symposium, but it'll give you an idea of this idea of, because she's not here now, what Nawi Carolyn was talking about earlier in terms of patterns and codes and language, and this need to find other ways to explore and embody those in the world. And the language cards are one thing, but they're kind of like just static objects, whereas if you're immersed in a experience, you kind of assimilate language in a more natural way. All right, thank you.
Thanks for that, Troy. I also like to note that Yao is probably one of our most weatherproof arcades out there. It almost doesn't have any roofing on top of it, and we installed all the arcades in the middle of winter, so it's constantly raining, and to our surprise, they all still work with just constant maintenance. So I guess it's one of those interesting things that Yao is the most exposed to the weather as well. If anyone was curious about the rainproofing of all those things. Up next, I'd like to welcome Nguyen to talk about Umesi Hole, the mound of grass that we saw earlier, talk about what Umesi is in the first place, and Umesi Band. Take it away.
Hello. Thank you, Carlo. Hi, everyone. My name is Uyen. I'm one third of Umesi Band with Matthew Riley sitting there at the front and Max Piantoni, who's not here. But together, the three of us, we're Umesi Play. I picked that photo of us from the first ever Parklet events in the CBD. Carlo took this photo, and that was just Max's doodle of a Umesi ram, because somehow that's our height. He's just perfectly in the middle of us, between me and Matt. Umesi is short for You, Me, and the City. I came up with this name. I started exploring the playful potential of sounds a few years ago by sound walking Melbourne CBD, and started a series of work called You, Me, and the City. Now it started in the form of animation, so I recorded the streets of Melbourne, its sounds and people, snippets of conversations on the street, and animated them. But after that, but then I started exploring interactivity as well, and not just animation. So instead of calling You, Me, and the City, we started Umesi Play. So that's the three of us, me, Matt, and Max. For the Playful Parklet, we made a work called Umesi Band. So Troy was actually the one who gave us the idea of, so there's the parklet and there's the pavement, so you have like that whole so if you're the pavement part of the parklet, what would you do? And there's some jokes, so we drew Umesi creatures on the ground, and he suggested that maybe we could hide some speakers as well, so that when people walk on the drawings, they make sound. So we came up with the concept of welcoming back people to the city after lockdown. when they come across this parklet and they're walking down the street and they step on one of these creatures, there's going to be sound like the creatures welcoming them back to the city. And if they finish the track, it finishes, they will have composed a song, and that's a welcoming tune for them. So welcoming them back to the city. This is, so I prepared a video of some of the play footages. There has been so far 12 iterations of Your Messy Band in different suburbs and settings. We have been on the street, we have done it as part of an academic conference internationally. We have also been a part of a festival. So I'll just play this video. It's, I think, 3 minutes long. If there's some way to maybe lower down the volume, I'll be able to talk over the video. I can't do it from here, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Damien.
So we draw chalk drawings of quirky, messy creatures on the ground. Their shapes and colours are inspired from the environment, the site, whatever's on site. That'd be a caterpillar character if there's a tree. That'd be like triangular characters inspired from the mountain, or like wood characters, water ones, eels for our first iteration in the city. Then people would come across, so whenever people step on any of these drawings, there'd be sound playing, and the track would sound differently depending on how people move and play. Normally people look for sensors and microchip and like laser beams or infrared. Yeah, the kind of technologies that's behind this, but it's actually just me and Matt hiding in a bush somewhere. And we have people really testing us as soon as they find out that it was us playing to their movement instead. We have kids like testing, like stepping on the drawing and then just hovering on top of it, or like avoiding it and then looking at us at the same time to see how we would react in sound to them. So those are the kind of very lovely interaction that we have with the people who play the work as well. It's very unfamiliar for me to be doing the talking. Normally it's Matt. Matt is our brainy person and who does all the speaking and public engagement. And I just hide in the bush playing the sound and did the drawings. But he's on his leave today, so I have to be here representing Your Messy Play. This was part of a festival, a Glenroy festival. The Glenroy Community Hub was launched, and I can't remember the name. They came out to check out Your Messy Band on the streets, and they invited us to also do a version in their courtyard as part of the launch. And these are just footages from that launch. That's Finn. He is on the keyboard playing to people's movement, hiding and grooving. I have been working out like a hands-off way to do Your Messy Band, so it's not me on the keyboard anymore, but Finn playing instead. And the introduction of a sound person to the work has been just magical, because Finn came up with something called a propelling track, which is just this mellow pad, a chord that we would trigger, and some kind of small beats that we would play in order to propel interaction. What we struggled the most when we staged Your Messy Band on the street for the first time, I think I had like a little panic, because I imagined it would be very playful, but I can't feel it being that way. When I tried when I did drawings on the street and people just walked past them, I freaked out, like, oh my God, it's supposed to be a playful thing. I do play, but no one is playing. They just walk past it. The pavement was so narrow, and everybody is like understandably on a mission walking down the street. So then I had this light bulb moment talking to my husband, who is a landscape architect, and he was like, you have to work with people's flow. You are in their space now, they walk the street, they are on a mission, and you have to work with that flow. You can't just draw 3 drawings and want them to step on all 3. This is essential. I think it's similarly to how Miguel Sicart say we are play architect instead of game designers or play designers. We create the kind of environment and play space, and it's up to the people, the citizens, whoever's going to walk down that street that day to choose however they play or whether they would do it or not. And we would just be like one version to another, would just add little things like, oh, maybe we can hint at a hopscotch kind of design. Maybe we'll have groove zones, like a really big rounded donut-shaped creature here and there to maybe prompt people to spiral around, or we could have like dots so that people tiptoe, and we have like a series of 2 same creatures so that people know to hop from one to another. So they're simple, there are little changes like that we keep making and exploring as well from one version to another. Whenever the parklet travel to a different suburb, it's like a whole new kind of experience for us. So we play as well, and not just people playing. We would do site visits and check out the site. If there's a tree, we would use that as inspiration for the design. If there are props on the street like chairs and stuff, would work with those kind of thing as well. Sometimes the track is really long, sometimes it's like a rounded swamp thingy. So it's new every time. I think in the first UMSC bands that we did, I kind of treated like almost an exhibition, which I shouldn't have because it's on the street and it's urban play. So after having done it for a few times now, and if it's a little bit patchy or if there are unexpected things that happen or not many people play that much, I'd feel completely fine now. And I think I was channeling that vibe from Troy. Whenever the difficulty, I'd turn to him and have a little chat, and he'd be like, oh yeah, that's the nature of urban play. So channeling that has been really helpful. That's your messy band. Here is just a little. So how I often work is that I plan like the shapes of the creatures, or like how a track would be. There'd be some tiptoeing, like the design of the drawing would hint at certain kind of way of walking or hopping, or like I have like just this length of the parklet, how it might, I often start with, so we put the word play starts at the 2 ends, so to prompt people, to hint at this being something playable, and then the drawings at the first 2 ends would be quite sparse, but then it gets like more hopscotch suggestive, and often in the middle would play something really wild, because people have got like a slow, subtle introduction to party time. So yeah, those were just some of the sketches that we did, and the very first parklet, UMSC band. Yes, it's UMSC whole time now. After parklet, here is UMSC Hall. We made this gigantic playable upside down grass pie for the Clarendon Street Arcade recently. As you can see, here, it's playable with your feet, and you are essentially knocking on the door of these creatures' house for them to clear their way for you to go deeper down and explore this underground world. It's playable with your feet. There are 6 buttons. You can play it in any order. You can play with your feet or your hand. You can jump, you can run around, and you can play by yourself, and it would be quite a contemplative experience. Or you can play with a group of friends, you can compete with one another as well. Like here we have 3 players collabing. They were aiming at tapping on all 6 buttons at the same time to see what happened. And I was really surprised that it worked. So there are many different funny, playful, amazing ways of playing UMSC Hall that we have witnessed. I think how we put it is that it's a gigantic musical toy, a gigantic sound toy that's in the shape of a street arcade, playable with your feet, and you go down a hall. So someone asked me, "Oh, yeah, you've heard of Dance Revolution, right? Is this essentially just Dance Revolution?" And I think our answer was, yeah, but this is a hall. And the screen is on the ground. We wanted to call it Yumi Hall at first, but for various reasons it's UMSC Hall now. And for between me, Matt and Max, we just call it the hall. These are just some photos from the behind the scenes. We started with some paper prototyping first. So as part of when we were working on the street arcades together, there was a game jam in the Future Play Lab, and while everybody else was working on the computer developing their game, I'm not a developer. Max does all the work for us as part of our 3. So I was just cutting cardboards and mocking things up in the first picture, and Duncan, who coded Yawat, told me that it seems like I was in a different game jam or something with all the paper prototypes. But yeah, this was the project with the most kind of physical component considerations that I've had to go through. We are a digital game maker and interaction designer. We often do interactive installations, and we got lots of help from the galleries we go to in terms of the actual physical staging. But for this one, we had to consider a lot of those kind of thing and install stuff ourselves. That was really fascinating. These are some of my really favorite. I love these photos that Carlo took whenever he did site visits to do maintenance. And the first one is just people using the arcade as like a bench and people sunbathing on the arcade. I really love it that people are not just playing the game how we had designed for things to be, but they are also using it their own way. When we designed the cabinet, we also wanted to consider the height of it so that it's sittable and it's kind of a lovely thing to be in space that you can sit on as well. So that's it. That's UMSC Band and UMSC Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Uyen. The AstroTurf is really super comfortable, but thanks for that, Uyen. I think having gone to most of the UMSC Band, UMSC Hall projects, one of the things I noticed that adults can be playful, and if they aren't playful, their children are the ones who are playful and then kind of join in the fun afterwards, especially for both UMSC Band and even the Hall. It just takes this opportunity to, remove all of those inhibitions and just start playing. And it's one of the things that I've noticed, especially when I was always there in UMSC Band and UMSC Hall. So. To talk about the 10-in-1 arcade.
Hi, so I'm Eamonn, as Carlo said. So I'm a student in the Masters of Animation Games and Interactivity program at RMIT. And I was, lucky enough to be asked to be involved in this project, which I'm really thankful for. What happened with the Magi 10-in-1? So as Carlo mentioned, I guess the idea was kind of like a demo disc in an arcade form. So they wanted there to be like a bunch of short, small experimental games in one cabinet that people could play. So what happened was they had a game jam. So there's a photo of the game jam as well as some of the behind me, so some of the kind of in-progress games. But yeah, so obviously there was like Nick, who is the technical director, kind of made the base of the project in Unity. And then so they approached people in the course who they knew were actively developing a game in Unity and were like, hey, do you want to come make a game? It was also week 12 of the semester, so I think not everyone said yes, but a lot of us did.
Thank you for saying yes.
Yeah. So we had, it was a 2-day game jam. So the first day we kind of like were introduced to the project and the Magic 10-1 and some of the constraints that we were meant to be designing games around. So for instance, games were to be played in about 2 minutes, kind of 2 minutes max. Games had to be played with a joystick and 2 buttons. And had some constraints around like art style and things. Sorry, I'm quite nervous. And then we had, I guess there was a suggestion that when we were kind of ideating, coming up with ideas for games on the very first day of the game jam, that we would have games that would be about Melbourne life or about city life in various ways, and whatever way we wanted to take that. So for instance, which games are on the screen? So in the top one we have a game called Glug Glug Game, and it was about, the idea was, in lockdown a lot of people bought plants as a way of coping with lockdown, so now you have to water all of your plants. And then it's a really hard game. And then in the bottom corner we have Sticky City, which is you kind of been exploring the city environment, and the idea is you want to find all the good items, all the good vibes, and avoid all the bad ones. And it's just kind of about getting as many points as possible in the time span. So I think that's the game jam. Next up we have, this is my game. So it's called Tram Chaser, because I think it was one of the suggestions, you could have a game with a tram in it, and I was kind of really latched onto that idea. I'm like, you could have a game with a tram in it. But I guess my idea was, I was like, because I'm always running late, so I was like, I'm always running down the street to catch the tram, and I thought, let's make a game about running down the street to catch the tram. So it's just kind of like a side-scrolling platformer game. There's like a time limit. You have to get to the end of the level before the timer runs out, and if you miss it, you miss your train, you miss the tram, and you're late to work.
Don't forget the coffee.
So there's also coffee, and there's power-ups, so it's like coffee and food that give you like extra time. That's kind of like a little bit of an extra mechanic. A lot of the visual design was done by Monique, who is another of the students at Maggie. So she kind of helped unify all the games in the game jam to have a consistent visual style. So there's a lot of shared assets, which I think might be the next slide. Yay, it is. Okay, so I think it started off as kind of Troy's, like the Playful City logo was kind of like the base character, but then we wanted to have I think Monique wanted to have like a bunch of different characters, kind of showing off different there's parents with children and people with disabilities and people of different races, and with different genders. For instance, in Tram Chaser, the character is very specifically non-binary, which we both wanted. So wanted it to be, kind of more genderless. And also some weirder people, like I particularly love the alien girl. I think she's my favourite of all the ones that Monique made, and I definitely put her in Tram Chaser, very specifically. I'm kind of lost. What are we talking about? Sorry.
Okay, on the next slide.
So we have, so this is what the arcade ended up looking like. As Carlo said, it was kind of designed to be like the most like traditional of the arcades, so it's kind of like, and because it was next to Petroni's Pizza, it's kind of like, I guess the most traditional arcade feel, like you have some pizza, you play an arcade game, it's all very like fun and vibey. I think these were the other 2 games that got developed. I think, so out of the 10 and 1, 5 games got like prototypes, and we obviously want more, so the arcade will still exist even if it is no longer in South Melbourne, but the purchase over will like hang on to the arcades, and I guess we'll have more game jams and make more games and just keep on ever expanding and see how we go. So the top one, it's called
bubble tea shaker.
Bubble tea shaker, that's it. I guess I was kind of inspired by Dance Dance Revolution, but you have to like follow the directions and shake a bubble tea and just get like a high score, and it's very fun. It has like a leaderboard, which I don't understand how the coding for that works, but it happens. And then the bottom one is a claw game, because I thought it would be the person who made it, Jennifer, just thought it would be funny to have an arcade machine that's actually a claw machine. And I love that was just like, I think this is funny, so I made it. Like, yes. Yeah, that's so many more. But, no, I think it's everything. I haven't seen, because like there's multiple, with Glug, there's they kind of track how many plants you keep alive, and if you keep all the plants alive, I think there's 7, you have like this, well done, and then if your plants die, it says, if any of them die, it says like, good work, you kept like X many alive, which is I think the more common win screen. I don't think I've only seen the well done in like testing, and then like I think Glug, because it's the hardest, so it's very easy to like all your plants die, but then it just says I can't remember what the phrasing is. It's something along the lines of like
all your plants are dead.
Like all the plants are dead, but it's like it's something like all your plants are dead, but like you tried or something, which I think was very. It wasn't like game over. It was like you tried. Yeah.
And I think what's good about this one is that you can invite a friend to help you out.
Yeah, you can work. It's like you can work together, which you definitely need to do. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, Eamonn.
Yes.
We're really grateful that you are in this project, and Eamonn keeps everything together because there's just so many students and people who are collaborating, and Eamonn is basically the glue between all of those games, and kind of makes everything look consistent. And I think one thing I forgot to mention is that all of our arcades can be accessed remotely by us. So we can constantly update them if you wanted a new game there, if it crashes or something. We can access it remotely from our homes and just check on all of them. They also turn off at a very specific time at night, 10 p.m. So that it won't be really something that sticks out in the middle of the night, making sound and light. It might draw unwanted attention. So, yeah.
Something else I'd probably quickly add is we worked with the Clarendon Street Traders Association, so that there are relationships with all of the shop fronts, and as you said, in fact all of the shops that the arcades are connected to, because they're drawing power from the shop. They keep an eye out, but particularly the dessert shop, Dessertopia, all constantly reporting. They're more or less like checking the arcade machines every day, so that's super helpful. We have both this remote connection, but also a feet on the ground too.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I quite like that we formed this relationship with the stores as well, that even after these arcades are gone, they showed interest of making some kind of long-lasting connection or a game of their own. So it was really
everyone wants more of Jukebot, which is
they want their own version.
Which is, if you see inside the Jukebot machine, there's about 200 different cable connections. It's the hardest one to make, of course.
Because I always joke to Troy that we have this parklet that we've been going around. I tell Troy, so we're now a circus now, right? We're traveling circus with this parklet with all of these different performers and different backgrounds. So now we're game makers and fabricators. These are arcades now. So it's really an interesting adventure. Just coming back to Bubble Tea game as well. So this is the newest game that we've launched this week. We might have to sort out some of the kinks, but it's a 2-player game, and one of the things that's interesting here is that we finally implemented the high score. And I remember when I was a kid, I was always wanting to beat this high score of the Simpsons game, arcade game. I think they have one in Acme, and I think the concept of a high score helps build a community around that space or that arcade, that hey, who is this? CAT, I want to beat this high score. And then once you beat that, they might probably go back to that and try to beat that score. So I think one of the future plans about these arcades is to just constantly be informed by all of these community building aspects of what an arcade is physical components, the concept of a high score, healthy competition, so to speak. And I guess, try to beat our high score in Bubble Tea Shaker game. The claw game is something that just gives homage to indie developers in Melbourne. So it's pretty much an informational thing. You get to see a logo of maybe Cult of the Lamb or something, and it tells you about this game. And during PAX, we'll be in the indie section, so say hi. So if you wanted to be part of the claw homage, you have this little Easter egg there, maybe the goose game eventually. It's just good to just network and be part of this little claw homage thing that we'll eventually have in the arcade. So
Yep, I forgot to mention, because you mentioned Narayana Johnson, who made the sound for Yawa. He's also the sound music and composer and sound designer for Cult of the Lamb, which I'm enjoying at the moment. And just before we move on to the other presenters, there is a postcard for the Clarendon Street Arcade if you're wanting to check out where they are on the map and find out more. So yeah, please check it out.
yeah, and if you're staying until 6 p.m., we are actually going there at 6 to 7. We're just going to a quick informal tour through the arcades as well.
See if you can beat Uyen and Matt at Yomasi Hall.
So it just takes the number 1 tram from Swanson Street and it goes straight to Clarendon Street Arcade. Thanks again, Eamonn. Up next, I'd like to introduce Ceri Hann from Public Assembly. We have a video of one of Ceri Hann's works, Public Assembly's works in our Playful Park, the very first one actually, in Little Lonsdale Street. So I'll play that video, Ceri, and it's really happy for you to be here. I think the clicker's with you, Ceri. Oh yeah, well, you can just simply press right twice.
Or the fact that we're individuals and we want to return to the landscape eventually.
If we've been on a screen, how can we take that back out into the city and start to reframe the kinds of views that we've seen in the energy places?
Anyway, this game that was already underway well before we started playing or thought we were playing, and this reframing process of coming to know ourselves as not only players in the game, but components in the game. The idea that through multiple reframing, through conversations that happen between different people, encountering each other, realizing that they're actually kind of, all components in this big game that's going on. We can see the whole city upside down.
Thanks for that, Ceri.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Well, I don't know if there's much more that needs to be said. Like, we are like not only playing a game. Like this idea that actually maybe I should step back for a moment from like my initial kind of like response. Is that we need microphones? We need the extra amplification. Right. So are you talking? So anyway, this idea that
Ceri Hann in the house.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's right. All you need is the appropriate accoutrements. The things that actually, to signify. Really the signifiers of our performance to start performing, or do you really need that? Because really we're performing our identities every step of the way. So like we're all role playing. I mean, this is probably one of the most high resolution role playing games that could be experienced. The one that we're experiencing right now. Like we've got this kind of stage here. We've got this kind of almost invisible wall. Exactly. Although these days it's a bit confused with hypermedia environments because we've got that's it exactly. But then I was exactly smashing it. That's right. And we've got a player who's escaped from the stage. It could be let loose into the audience. But that's one of the big things that we were trying to achieve is this kind of moment of realization. I've got a few props here. How's this for a prop? Did you see that change? Okay, so we've got orange, and then throw it up in the air. And look, it's turned green. Maybe it's kind of orange again. And then it's green again. Like, what is it about, how can we kind of share this experience? This experience of flipping stuff. And we might be testing materials testing of this particular game component. But anyway, just the loose metaphor that I was talking about with regard to this is that we're all constituted by these like multiple kind of interconnected forces that are at play. That if the right twist, if the right moment of flux can be brought into our existence, using things like chance and. I don't know, we got the chance. But yeah, exactly. Well, that's right. Yelling out another from a different game, golf. That we can use components from this. We've got bowling here. Okay, we could invoke almost any of the components that we're familiar with other games, other kind of games that we've been playing since childhood. But to bring about this experience of looking around. And all these kind of assumptions that we have about the world that we're in, and being able to flip those, like being able to say, hang on, we're in an internal space here, but hang on, if I look over there, that looks like an external wall. That looks like an external wall. What's happened? Maybe this indicates to some extent some shift and change in the architectural space, some annexing of what was external space into internal space. And if I was to walk out of this building, I might realise that I'm in a contemporary version of the Truman Show, and it wouldn't matter how far I went from anywhere, I'd still be somehow, within the kind of like the all-seeing eye of, I don't know, is it DARPA, is it kind of, I'm not sure exactly which of the various kind of like agencies that have almost total kind of like surveillance capacity at this point. So if we, I don't want to get too much into all that kind of stuff, but because it starts getting particularly unplayful. It's hard to play when you're being really seriously monitored. Okay, is that okay? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah. And so really, just to recap, we've got some signifiers here, and so all we need to really do is to share a few of the potential signifiers about pointing out this fact that we're actually already in a game that is already underway, and basically the players can really point this out just through their process of realizing what it is they're pointing out. I'm not sure. It's not for me to point out things. It's up for the players themselves to point out whatever they want. And one of the ways that we were pointing that out was actually distributing these, and this is with myself and Linda Roberts. So Linda Roberts is the other half of Public Assembly, and we trundled a library trolley full of a whole range of oversized playing cards, so we could think of ourselves as, and they'd been cut out a little bit like the ones I passed around. And these boxes, which are actually derived from the shopping, pretty much the shopping precinct of the Queen Vic Market, and the Queen Vic Centre, QV, previously the hospital, and because the parklet was situated between this building, like apparently the repository of knowledge, information, history, and kind of commerce. So basically these boxes are essentially wine boxes with a magnifying glass and a bit of tracing paper, and people could actually look through them and just flip the city. But at the process of doing that was also this request to actually think about all these other structures that we take for granted and flipping those in the imagination and having an experiential moment where things might, it's like just to labour the kind of the point in the pun, to come into focus to a certain extent, to something that's actually that we're actually all in play already. There's already a game underway, and it's for every person has got like a different understanding of the rule sets and those flows that we've been talking about before. Everything's in flow, flux. Whether it be the money, the kind of information, the kind of the sense of self, and everything else. This is essentially what we're actually offering was that moment of realization. Realization that the game is already underway and we were already playing, and it's to do that, continue that playing process in a deeper, more kind of self-reflexive way, so that we might do it in a and collectively help each other to do it in a more like a nuanced and kind of maybe more kind of valuable way, more generative way, a way that might improve the kind of the power relations to be less kind of hierarchical and more kind of supportive of one another, and even and that goes all the way through to even this set of playing cards. I mean, it's referencing royalty and hierarchy and things, and actually I think we need to be considering a lot more the processes and respect for the environment that the First Nations people have for this place, and actually working in the other direction rather than looking up to the power that way, looking up to the immense power of the natural forces that we're all part of, and that's an even bigger game. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. But hopefully that was a good little overview of like what we hope to achieve. Whether we did or not is up to the players.
Thanks, Ceri. And sounds like a good premise for a Melbourne mega game.
Thank you, Ceri. Well played. And I think Ceri will have a circuit bending workshop in our MIT Building 8 this Friday.
Friday week.
Yeah.
Circuit bending. Sorry. Circuit bending, just to add an extra kind of to blow another kind of component in the circuit. Circuit bending is maybe people might remember this from like even 15 years ago. Basically pulling apart kids' toys and short circuiting them. Like you can do that very simply as long as it's battery powered, by licking your fingers and basically shorting the circuits to make the toy do something that it wasn't originally meant to do, which might be, rather than saying "mummy," so just "mommy" or something like that. But some sort of but anyway, there's they're turning the speak and spells into sort of alien incantation machines and all that kind of stuff. But whether or not it's there's the fun bit of that, and the fun bit of realizing once again you're actually part of the circuit, and your consciousness will always kind of be completing that circuit. And we could get into the second order cybernetics and all that kind of stuff, but that's probably a bit boring. But the basic idea is that we can meta program. This is actually something that allows us to think about our brains as being like also circuitry that we're at liberty to retrospectively kind of change. And actually we have all these received kind of cultural processes that we can actually if we have fun together, we can actually, and also with an intention, we can actually, reprogram those kind of old and not so useful habits into better habits. Okay, I'll pass the mic on.
Thank you, Ceri. Yeah, so if you want to go to Ceri's circuit bending workshop, it's on Friday at 4 p.m. I think. Friday week, yeah. And our parklet is also parked in Building 8 of RMIT, so if you want to see what the parklet looks like, it's very nice. There you go.
By the way, you'll notice the keyboard.
Right. Well played. Right. So up next, our last speaker, I'd like to welcome Lee Ko to introduce whimsy and metaphor.
And I've already messed up. This is going well. All right. Sorry, I'm going to stand up because I am actually going to talk to this slide a little bit, as well as to the audience. And I'm not going to sort of bend myself into a pretzel. In order to do that, that's just going to ruin the experience for everybody. I would also like to say a very quick welcome to the, as you were saying, we are constantly being observed. We are in fact on the internet right now. Hello to everyone who's joining through the gather that I've decided to wait until the last minute to spring upon everybody else except for my collaborators over that side of the stage. Hi, you can call me Lee. And this is a screenshot from my phone. I promise this is relevant. So, this is a screenshot that I took a couple of weeks ago that is of a Google image search that I took on my phone. So there's, basically, let's start with the basics. You can see that I was searching for images of destroyed city. You can see that there are a whole bunch of images on there that you can see how Google has chosen to interpret this request based on some arcane combination of the words used, my previous search histories from which it is gleaning what I might be interested in or not interested in. You can see that for whatever reason it has chosen to given me, chosen to provide me with a series of relatively realistic or extensively photoshopped images rather than, say, cartoons or anything overly stylized. You can see that other common searches might have been anime, wallpaper, sci-fi. Maybe I could have refined this so that I got something more cartoony or something that's a little bit more specific. But if you have a look a little bit deeper than that, you can have a look at, you can see that I messed up the buttons on the side of the phone when I was taking this screenshot. You can see that instead of just taking the screenshot, I've also accidentally opened the volume controls. You can tell that at the time I was using a Bluetooth device. If you were particularly perceptive, you might have a guess that I was using this Bluetooth device, as it seems something that I have used enough that I completely forget to take off when I'm in public speaking situations. You can see that at the top of the phone it was 1:06. It's not clear whether that was 1:06 a.m. or p.m. The time that I took the, you can tell that it's, well, you can't tell whether it's 24-hour time or 12-hour time. There's no indication of whether that was day or night. You can tell that I use at least 3 different messaging apps if you include email as a form of messaging app, which, might as well these days, honestly. And that I have not checked those messages. This may cause you or me an indeterminate amount of anxiety depending on how you feel about your messaging apps. You can tell that I was, on the other side, you can tell that I had an alarm set that may or may not have been going off soon. You can tell that I have my phone set to vibrate. You can tell that I had a little bit of internet connection, 24% battery remaining, so at least I haven't subjected you to the red bar of 1% battery on this particular case. You can tell what kind of network I was using. There's actually quite a lot of information that you can glean about this particular image. Something that you can't tell, for example, though, is why was I looking up a destroyed city in the first place? What was it about a destroyed city? What cause did I have for being interested in this topic? I'll tell you right now, it's because I was giving approximately this presentation in about half an hour and hadn't planned anything yet. And I had to find something very quickly, and this is what I came up with. There's also another layer to this if we go a little bit deeper, and now we come back to sort of the things that Ceri was talking about the storage of knowledge. We're in a library. This is now stored on a Google Sheet. I've seen a few people taking pictures. This is now stored on several people's cameras. This is stored on whatever recording that we have chosen to take of this. It's still probably somewhere in my phone history, I suppose. The way that I got this picture onto, there was my phone, and then I put it onto my tablet in order to screen share it at the original presentation. In order to do that, I messaged it to myself using Discord, so it's now on a Discord server somewhere. The point is, I don't actually know how long this image is going to be around. It's certainly not always going to be connected to this speech that I'm giving, where I take people through what all of you, what you can glean about this image from what I'm talking about. In fact, there's probably a whole lot of things that if someone were to find this image in the future, they might have a look at, something else about it. They might be able to tell something about the time period that it was taken in based on which Google logo is being used. They might know more about these device icons than me. They may be able to tell a much deeper wealth of information based on the fact that I had certain icons available to me on the screen. Which brings me to, thank you, that brings me to what I'm actually talking about here today, which is absolutely nothing to do with the Clarendon Street Arcade. It's a sort of future project of the Future Play Lab. And it is the Museum of Lost Cities. Anyone who is joining on the Gather this room will be very familiar to them because this is the opening room. This is the room that you come into when you enter the Gather space. Up in the back, the room on the right is where everyone will have walked in who is currently watching this from the screen. They will have walked into that room. At the time this photo was taken, I had completely forgotten to put in the little impassable squares over the rope sectioned off section, so you could technically walk out of that door into the nothing void that is that will eventually lead to another room. But yes, this is my project. This is the Museum of Lost Cities. This is an exploration of where knowledge exists in the gaps. The first exhibit of this museum that's eventually going to be behind that little rope barrier is a virtual reconstruction of a fictional city that is as historically accurate as it behooves me to make it at the time, based on a Bronze Age Mycenae, actually, based off of the cities of Mycenae and Knossos. And the point of the Museum of the Lost Cities is to use the information that we do have in order to highlight the information that we don't have. You know, we have an increasing interest in this sort of thing online. There have been discussions recently of artifacts that were found, and there's sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge discussions of, oh yes, anything that archaeologists don't exactly know what it was for. It was a ritual device. Which some people have then come and pointed out later, no, this is a sewing object. We still use these today. It's just that the archaeologist didn't sew, didn't know what this device was, but yes, it must be for rituals. I will put it in the catch-all bucket. Going back to this sort of, this image here, there's, let's get a bit of audience participation. So where are the gaps? What can you look at this? We've already discussed a lot of the things that you can tell about where and when and why this was taken, or the situation in which it was taken. What's a gap?
The other 42 tabs?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know what would have been on those other, on those other tabs. You can tell that I've been doing a lot of internet browsing. Are they all about destroyed cities? Potentially. No, I'm not telling you what the other 43 tabs were.
It's all sort of CBD skylines, and cities are a lot more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got this idea of, if someone looked back, looking at this, you might easily think that all cities, or all destroyed cities, or all cities that could be thought of at the time looked something like a CBD skyline.
No people?
No people? We have no idea what the people in any of these cities looked like. I'm probably getting close to running out of time now, but I will, so yes, I'll leave it there, but I just wanted to present the sort of very basis and the core idea of museums. So the museum will be running several events over the next few years. We're going to start off with the virtual museum, and we're going to slowly, as pandemic allows and as organisations allow, bring these kinds of ideas of knowledge and gaps and space and time further out of the past and into current Melbourne. We've got an alleyway project planned that I will need to attempt to describe to someone to get their permission for it at some point, but we can burn that bridge once we've crossed it. And we'll be doing some art exhibits and things like that, because fundamentally I am the sort of person that has ideas and my background is writing, but frankly I would like to put my grubby little fingers in all of the pies, so I take on these ambitious projects with skills that I don't have and rely on other people. I think that's called community in order to help me pull them off. But thank you very much for listening to my ramble today. This is the Museum of Lost Cities. You can call me Lee, and I hope to be presenting more of this for you in the future.
Thanks, Lee. That was great. And just a reminder that it's so wonderful that everyone is here in person, but there is also the Gather link if you want to drop in, because it'll still be live later on. It won't be streaming this event because we'll be done, but you can go and visit the first room in Lee's museum anytime during Games Week.
Yeah, and ever since this morning, Lee made this little virtual space just for Play About Plays, and I had students come into the Gather space to watch us live, so it's not necessarily always on YouTube Live or Twitch, but it's more of a virtual space or a hangout space that even if you're not here, you're in this kind of virtual space to see the stage live and hear the talks as well. Right. Well, thanks everyone for your time and attention. I'd like to open up the floor. We have 15 minutes for questions. You can ask anything about Future Play Lab, Clarendon Street Arcade, Yawa, UMSC, Public Assembly, and even MCN Metaphor. So just raise your hand if anyone has any questions. That's right.
For Clarendon Street, I just wanted to know, how did you all get permission for the electricity? Was it a generator, or did the project get approved and then you went to retailers after you all selected a site?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll talk through the process. So, because the project was initiated by the City of Port Phillip, we're able to, already have a connection, or there was an existing narrative around the project. It wasn't just a bunch of play researchers coming along and saying we want to turn your street into an arcade. However, really the key connection was the Traders Association, because of course the local government, to be honest, we did some walks along the street, and you kind of get a feel for how people might respond anyway. So one person was just openly how would I put it? Anyway, he had some words to say about the council, so we won't try and work with this particular shop, whereas others were really welcoming. But I think this kind of speaks to the conversation this morning around, it's not really like you just go to council and it's like the central kind of operation. It's really a network of networks, and so the Traders Association, our experience with public space, all of these threads were important. We did actually have a solar-powered solution, but that was going to be even harder to deploy. But we've developed that for another project, 64 Ways of Being, where in Footscray, for example, there's an illuminated sign, and we had the same problem with power, and because there were so many tenants in this building, it was just impossible to plug in anyway. And so it became much easier to put a solar panel on the roof and run a cable to it. So there's always another way. But yeah, in this case, it is a significant cost to the project. I think running the leads and just plugging in power sockets was maybe 5% of the overall budget, which is big when you're making 5 games and those kinds of things. So yeah, so logistics does come into it. I probably should allow time for another question, because part of the more practical research that the lab does is how you allow things to happen in public space. These solutions, and we could talk solar power for another 10 minutes, but we won't.
Thank you. Anyone has any questions? Sure.
Hey, not a beautifully formed question, but something about this dynamic that's been coming up a little bit today around emergence in play and not anticipating outcomes, and then having a design intention, and also when outcome is demanded by the authorizing environment that's sort of permitting and funding. And just, curious to invite comment on any of your projects where you've negotiated that either as going, well, I do have a design intention, or that sort of showed up, or where you were sort of forced to have one when you didn't want to.
Yeah, I might jump straight in on this just because there was a question I didn't get to ask this morning, or something I didn't get to raise this morning that I think is important as part of this conversation. It's maybe adjacent to that, which is around what play is and the danger of it being. There's the term play washing, and so I think especially when you're working in public space, this is a real danger, and that was actually our first concern with the Clarendon Street Arcade project, as we thought, council's just going to want us to put up all of these arcade machines to make it look fun, but they won't care about the content. But actually they gave us complete freedom to develop these really quirky experimental games that we didn't even know they were going to work. We didn't say that at the time, but did work because we were able to design them in a way and to shape them a little. So it's been, after the launch, some observation, updating, watching people play, allowing that to happen. The other point is really around instrumentalization of play. So where if you have this is where your design intention can go really wrong, and I think everyone remembers, or it's still a term that gets used, this idea of gamification, that you could apply game rules to any part of life, and so that would be fun. And the worst case, there are probably many bad examples of this, but I'll list two. One is a fridge that was made for older people to smile at. So because it was like, the research shows that if people smile, they feel better, just the physical act of smiling. So to get a drink out of the fridge, you have to smile at it. So it's really really transactional and just kind of like not playful at all, but it was meant to be a playful project. The other example I've lost it, might come back to me, but I think more to the point around this idea of emergence, I think this is where sometimes when I'm talking about urban play, there's a bit of a spectrum between play and games. And so rather than it be, games are super rule-based, and a lot of digital games, particularly, especially in the commercial space, whereas play can be completely open-ended. So a bit like what Ceri did just then. I didn't even know that was going to happen, but we're able to kind of jump in and play with that context. And of course, a lot of it happens, and this is where you get emergent play, is where you've got some rules which are framing the context to allow for a set of possibilities, so that it's not just, so people feel like they're in, if I want a better term, a magic circle inside a play space, but they don't have to conform with rules. And so, that's where you get that really sweet spot of emergence happening. And I guess that we would all aim to that, to aim to be in that space as game designers. So I don't know if you want to comment, Nguyen or Eamonn or Lee, Ceri, about emergent gameplay in your projects.
Yeah, I think that's Matt, you might be able to talk to this.
He's on holiday.
But I think in our work as well, like whatever Matt, I, and Max do, we always would try to invite play instead of. It's very rare that any of our work is super structured. We really want people to, for example, if you play the second time, it's entirely different from the first time, and we are more interested in kind of inviting and creating those kind of experience. So yeah, the design suggests things, but it's all entirely up to the interactor and player to do whatever they want. And as creator and more particularly your messy band, us being behind on the keyboard and playing the sound to the interactions, every second of it is us inviting playful interaction. If we see people, for example, merely making a more expressive gesture or movement, we'd really play the sound to that to kind of invite it more, or like, and for example, if someone is ready to take a big leap and we play like a really low bass sound, they suddenly slow down. You'd be amazed how when they are, like it's a little bit, it's not the easiest way to invite play, but once people have allowed themselves to kind of do that, it gets really fun.
Just before you do, I think I'll just quickly add to that, because it's connected again to what Matthias was saying before, or earlier today, which is around this play as a way of being, because I think that's what surprises a lot of people is when they go into that state. Actually, it's a state of possibility, and suddenly, it seems like all of these things are unlocked, and that's what really surprises people. I think, especially if they're not usually in a state of play, that's what becomes addictive about it in a way, or rewarding. Maybe addictive is not the right word.
Just very quickly.
Back from holiday.
Yeah, I'll be 1 minute and then I'll go back on leave. But with your Mesi band, we imagined that the intention was to engage pedestrians, passers-by in a playful way. And we were talking about sort of non-humans before. People are on motorbikes, there's like dogs playing it, there's,
Duncan did a hand.
Freedom protesters.
Duncan just was like non-human movements, and when people observe this kind of different kinds of interactions, it was almost like every time someone saw Duncan, they would just almost try to outdo him sometimes, and it was quite an unexpected, surprising, beautiful to see the way that I had this concept of pedestrians, but it just ended up, motorbikes, animals, everything engaged with the world.
Thanks, man.
And I think the idea of it being of urban play being events, I think came up earlier today, which I think is really accurate as well. We'd always, I think, try a little bit to make a scene when, like, we would put on high-vis vests when we are installing the work, and people would be walking by asking, and we would engage in conversations with them, and we would invite them to come back. Or like, come back in an hour. There'd be sound. Whenever we install, that's a kind of, I guess, opportunity to invite playing as well, because we are in their area. They live around, or they would be on their way to get something and come back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those invitations to play are important. I'll just quickly talk about the, often with the events, we have also the PSOs there who are Playful Spaces officers. They walk up to members of the public to collect important data about the ambient play index of the street by asking them, have you been playful today?
No, but I wish I was.
Come into our parklet.
What's the part?
Exactly.
So, we have the Playful Spaces officers.
Is it possible to actually, no, this is something that comes to mind because a couple of comedy festivals ago I was walking back and forth in front of the town hall with a sandwich board on that said the comedy festival is a joke. And so the playfulness, I guess, was that I was meta heckling, so rather than just heckling one comedian, I was heckling the whole festival. But so that just came to mind when I was about to ask you a question as to whether or not you've thought about the meta implications of the play on the street is kind of one dimension of the play, and a dimension of the play, but I think there's a meta play going on in that the way, and this kind of relates back to the question you're asking about emergence. I think that there's actually this, in terms of this interplay or kind of like, dialectic between structure and agency in large systems, that the play on the street that is happening is actually affecting the play of these other complex systems of bureaucracy.
And 100%. And when the next session is going to be all about that. And I'll give you an example. Also, one time I stepped in as a PSO because somebody was unwell and I just put the vest on, and it was amazing the responses that people had. So it was kind of because it's quite disarming as a question. And so some people would giggle, some people would tell me their whole personal story. Some people said, "Look, I'm really actually having a really bad day," and then they went to play Communitas, which is one of our other games, and they came back and they were really happy. And then one person said, "Oh, look, sorry, I haven't got time. I'm only allowed out for 1 hour each day." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's strange." So,
I get I get that level, but the reason I'm not saying this is that Linda Roberts, the other half of Public Assembly, is currently feverishly trying to bring a PhD into a format that can actually be submitted. And the PhD is is reflecting on her role as the manager, managing the public art program in the city of Melbourne. So very much a lot of these kind of those aspects of what we're talking about here today was very much what she's reflecting on. And I think that there's the thing that has become really it's sort of a difficult thing to articulate, but this idea that the city itself, in order to keep maintain a vitality and vibrance, needs to actually invite these kind of moments of play back deep into the structure. And I think that you're doing it on street level, but the fact that it's on street level and also being kind of championed by these institutions means that it kind of allows all of this play to happen in between existing quite ossified and structured rule sets internally within government, and that actually opens up.
It's like what Quentin pointed out earlier, that it's quite. There's a lot of irony around the parklet. In that, for example, to get our first parklet up, to get a community parklet installed just outside this building, we couldn't use the parklet permitting process because we weren't connected to a restaurant or cafe, so we had to get an event permit instead. And so, you're always kind of working around these rules. But I think what also came up earlier today is that there is a willingness to play with public space because of the changes, and of course that can be super critical. And I would say that a lot of what we're doing is there's a lot of levels to what we're doing, but one of them is trying to recreate what I would call this matrix moment that I had about cities during lockdown, where it's kind of like, well, I think it's what you're talking about as well, where, it's like Keanu Reeves at the end of the first Matrix movie when the bullet stops in front of them, like, oh, okay, this whole city is constructed. It's actually as constructed as any video game. It's just made of hard stuff. So we don't think of it as being constructed, but it is.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the Matrix always kind of comes around in conversations like this. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because the thing that also I think that came to mind when you're talking about play at a city scale is something that Linda became aware of with regard to how an artist that was invited over from Berlin to here. It was one of the secret recipe that they had for getting large-scale things happening in public is actually you can utilise this thing about filming permits, because everyone loves the play, as in including the money that flows from all the associated kind of things that happen when a big film is being filmed in a city. But you can turn large aspects of the city into a playground effectively, as long as you've got a film camera and set and I think that's actually a really interesting thing to reflect on as well. It's the idea of there's a whole lot of layers to that as well. But effectively, even the Matrix being filmed in Sydney, part of it, that there's large parts of the city can actually have that magic circle kind of like actually drawn around it, and then have this kind of magical kind of like spell that where everyone can, pretty much stop, those bullets can stop for a moment.
Yeah, so a common technique of play is to take something that's familiar and reframe it. And this is, a strategy that appears in all kinds of things like culture hacking, in fine art as defamiliarization, but it's what play architects and game designers do.
Right. So many responses to one question, that's amazing. But I think if I wanted to add as well, just circling back to the Clarendon Street Arcade, just adding to that immersion play. It's so interesting to see how game designers suddenly have so many layers now of what player experience means for them. It's not just something on the screen or what your controls are, it's how they interact with this physical, tangible thing on the street, what kind of controls they are, which part of the body they use, how far do they see this thing, how does it situate when they walk to this physical thing. And it just adds to so many layers of, you're not just a game designer anymore, you're an urban kind of play experience designer. You're not designing for an app, you're not kind of looking at what's the most efficient way to navigate this website or app. It's kind of what's the most playful, most emergent way to experience, or at least have a lived experience of this thing that you have on the street. And those things kind of contribute to our learnings as well, and how we evolve our concept of what play experience could be like. Yeah.
I was taking up all the
That's all right. As usual,
really
Troy went and said what I was about to say anyway.
Well, I know that Ceri and Lee are both on the next session, so we might pick up this conversation in 10 minutes when we come back from Melbourne as a mega game.
Right. Well, in closing, thank you everyone for your time and attention. We are the Future Play Lab. You can be part of the Future Play Lab. Just reach out. You can follow us in our socials, Playful Now, or follow our developments in Play About Place. My name is Carlo Tolentino. Troy Innocent, Eamonn, Harte, Nguyen, Ceri, Hann, and Liko. Thanks.